Hi there guys, and welcome to another episode of the Cover Zero Show with me, your host Simon Conboy. This episode, going to be previewing one of the weekend's potentially top matchups as the Buccaneers head to Minnesota to take on the Vikings. Buccaneers coming off a dominating performance against the Bears. The Vikings a disappointing loss to the Steelers, where Sam Bradford missed the game with a bone bruise. As a result, the Case Keenum led offence was just not able to get anything going. They ended up losing that game quite handily. So in this preview, I'm going to go through what I think each team's going to look to do schematically, what I think some of the key matchups are, and how I generally feel like the game is going to go. Obviously, the big concern is whether Bradford plays or not. So we'll go through the Vikings offence first with the matchup against the Buccaneers defence. If Bradford plays, I think this is a really good matchup. He played great against the the Saints in week 1. And whilst I think we saw the offensive line struggle a little bit last week, the Buccaneers pass rush isn't the greatest in the world, so you'd expect Bradford to have some time. And the corner group beyond Brent Grimes, whilst I think Hargreaves is going to develop into a good player, we're yet to see dominating performances from him. He plays very soft cover. Well, he played very soft coverage last year. Last week, that was just the way the game went. The Buccaneers had such a big lead. So I think that's going to be the key. I don't expect Dalvin Cook to have a huge amount of running room in this game. The Buccaneers front seven, I expected them to be good heading into the season. They absolutely dominated the Bears' offensive front. I don't think the Vikings have the line to have a huge amount of success against Gerald McCoy and Chris Baker in the middle. Getting outside against this team is going to be tough, particularly if Quan Alexander plays. Him and Levante David cover a lot of ground. TJ Ward, I'd expect him to see some snaps, especially if Case Keenum's on the field, because you'd figure that's when they're going to go with a very heavy run game. Dalvin Cook will have to have a big performance, you'd think, for this team to be able to get the victory. This game, I think, on both sides of the ball is going to come down to which side manages to dominate the trenches, assuming Bradford plays. I think if Keenum plays, this Buccaneers team's just going to have a bit too much for the Vikings. I can't see a Keenum-led offense having a huge amount of success against this defense. And as long as Winston plays a clean game, I think that'll be the end of that one. But with Bradford playing, the Vikings have enough weapons to give this team trouble. I don't expect Cook, as just sort of hinted at, to have a huge amount of success in this game, regardless of who's quarterbacking. But if Bradford's there, the Buccaneers will have to respect the passing game a significant amount more. Last week they showed no respect to Glennon and the Bears' weapons. As a result, they were able to just nullify the run game. I think that is the situation we'd be looking at if Keenum were to be playing. And I'm not sure Diggs and Phelan would have great success against this secondary. I think Brent Grimes is a more than savvy enough corner to handle Stephon Diggs reasonably well. If there is a weakness in this Bucs defence, it is in that secondary, and I just don't think Keenum's the guy to expose that. If Bradford's there, you've got Rudolph, Adam Phelan. They've got enough guys to make plays down the field, potentially force this defence to loosen up. But I do feel, with the potential explosiveness of the Buccaneers offence, that the Vikings are going to have some success running the ball. If they allow Dalvin Cook to just get taken out of this game and they're one-dimensional, I think that's when the Buccaneers pass rushers can really have a big impact on this game. They generated a lot of pressure last week against the Bears. I'm not sure the Vikings line is much better, if at all. And as a result, the Bears were forced into doing a very dinky-dunk, quick passing game. This Bucs team has been good at clamping down once teams get close to the red zone over the last several games, if you go in toward the end of last season. And I'd worry that if Bradford's not there to stretch the field a little vertically, that they could be in some trouble. And so I wouldn't expect Diggs to have a big game with Brent Grimes opposite him. So I think the responsibility would then fall on Adam Phelan and Rudolph to have big games. I think especially Rudolph, he needs to be able to open up the lanes over the middle to try and force these Buccaneers linebackers to play him a bit more respect, move back off the line of scrimmage a bit to free up Dalvin Cook. Cook's going to be, you'd think, covered by either Quan Alexander or Levante David on most plays coming out of the backfield. They're both pretty good at that job. I think that's going to be a tough one for him. So that's where they need to try and keep those guys focusing on some of the other weapons coming across the middle of the field. Phelan, I think, can have some success down the sidelines if he can. Getting behind Hargreaves has been difficult for teams. He's given up a lot of plays, but they've all been in front of him. If they can get some success, get some play action going, maybe have Phelan attempt a couple of double moves, I think he can get in behind. Diggs, I think they'll stick to the short stuff. Grimes is a very savvy player. I think trying to go over the top of him with Stephon Diggs is probably not the greatest idea, because Diggs is a very good player, but he's not the most explosive. And I don't fancy his chances affecting the game on the deep plays. So for me, expect to see Rudolph heavily featured early in this game. I think to try and loosen this team up, it will be a lot of short stuff. I don't think they're going to trust this offensive line early in this game to do a great job in pass protection. I think they're going to try and attack the outside with Dalvin Cook. The interior, as I say, that I just think the Buccaneers are going to be very difficult to run on whilst those two defensive tackles are both healthy. Going outside, not the greatest option either. Got good ends at setting the edge in Ayers and Golston, and they've got a lot of speed at linebacker, so I'm not expecting a huge amount from this run game. But it's got to be present. They've got to be able to keep the clock ticking along. They've got to keep Bradford in reasonable situations. If they can do that, then I think this offense can have some success. And I think for the Vikings, they've got to be looking to try and keep this a low-scoring game. From the Buccaneers' perspective, I think we kind of covered a lot of it. The key matchups are going to be whether these tackles can hold up on the interior. I suspect they can, and I think they'll be able to get a fair bit of pressure. I don't think the Vikings' interior, particularly with the inexperience there, is going to be able to handle those guys, frankly, particularly in the run game. On the exterior, they've got to try and stop Noah Spence. He's the impact pass rusher that the Buccaneers have, particularly if Bradford does play with this knee issue. They can't afford to have him take too many hits. In all honesty, I'm expecting Bradford to sit this one out. With the nature of that injury, it's very easy to re-aggravate, and if he goes down for a prolonged period of time, then I think this team could be in big, big trouble. Whilst this game will be a big issue for them if he doesn't play, sometimes I think you've just got to err on the side of caution, because they will be potentially sacrificing their season, and I'm not sure this is the point in the year to do that. So you expect the Buccaneers. I just feel like the defensive line's got too much quality for this offensive line. How they handle them on the outside, I'm not sure. That's my one concern. I mentioned Rudolph. If the Buccaneers get a lot of pressure early on, especially up the interior, I think they'll need to try and put Rudolph in as a blocker to try and help out. And if you're keeping Cook in as well, then I think you've not got enough guys out on routes to threaten this team. The Buccaneers do not blitz a huge amount. They'll do it sporadically, but they're more than happy to play a lot of guys in coverage and sit off pretty deep. And whilst that's very much Bradford's MO generally as a short rhythm passer, I'm not sure the receivers are explosive enough after the catch to really threaten this defence. There's a lot of speed on this Tampa defence, and there's some pretty good tacklers there. And I'd expect to see him tighten up. So I don't think we'll be seeing a high-scoring performance from the Vikings. Expect to see the Buccaneers, I think, approach the game somewhat similarly to what they did last week. I think they'll show a lot of run-heavy defensive fronts, try and force Bradford to beat them, or Keenum, whatever the case may be. If they can get that going early, then expect to see the Buccaneers mixing it up a little bit more, playing some zones and throwing the odd blitz in. They've got to be able to get the Buccaneers off of that initial game plan. Otherwise, I can't see much success for this offense. And I see that offensive line getting overwhelmed often. But they need to remain balanced, and they need to that's all going to happen if they can get this short passing game going early in the game without giving up any turnovers, much like the Bears did. On the other side of the ball, a fascinating matchup. The Vikings' defence has been stellar thus far. Everson Griffin's gotten off to an absolutely incredible start to his season. He's been fantastic in both games. Gave Villanueva an absolute nightmare last week. He was very difficult to handle. He's playing great. He's going up against Donovan Smith, who is susceptible to this type of pass rusher, a guy with array of moves and a highly effective speed rush. I think he's going to be critical to the Vikings' potential success. They're going to have to get pressure on Jameis. Last week, Jameis was very comfortable, got sacked a couple of times, but other than that, there wasn't a huge amount of pressure in his face. He was able to sit in the pocket, pick the Bears apart in the first half, and in the second half, he just didn't have to do anything because of the Buccaneers having such a significant lead. That pressure is going to have to be there. They've got Darnell Hunter on the other side. I think he can have some success against Demar Dotson. What they need to try and do is have enough success early on that the Buccaneers are forced to keep extra protection in to try and slow these edge rushers down. Because I think if there's too many guys out in the route, they're going to have some problems defending these guys. The Buccaneers will be able to mix things up, and I think that will really open the offense up for Jameis and crew. The interior, that's going to be a big deal. How the Buccaneers can deal with Linval Joseph. They didn't run the ball exceptionally well last week. The Bears did get tired, however, and the Buccaneers were dedicated to that. So I expect to see a similar sort of plan. The Buccaneers want to be a power running, play action, deep shot team. So Joseph is going to be integral. I thought Kendrick started has played very well thus far. Anthony Barr's doubtful. He's big. I think he needs to be in this game. I think the Vikings are going to have to be able to blitz effectively every now and then just to force that pressure through. Because I just feel against this year's edition of the Buccaneers, the offensive line is clearly the potential issue there. You've got to be able to get that pressure on Jameis Winston, because if you can let him make good decisions, and most of his bad decisions come under pressure where he just gets that urge to make a play. If you let him just sit there and do what he did last week, I think they're going to be in major trouble. So I think Barr is their best blitzing linebacker. If he's missing, I think that's a big deal. He's a great overall player, and he'll help them stuff this run game, which they're going to need to do early. I've got no doubt the Buccaneers are going to enter this game looking to establish that run, because they know the Vikings have a pretty talented secondary. This is a good pass coverage team. I think these defenses mirror each other in some ways. The Vikings just have that little bit more proven talent, and they've got the edge rushers that the Buccaneers lack, and that's what makes them such a top unit. But I feel like they play a fairly similar style, and the Buccaneers, the O-line's going to be the concern. Expect to see a lot of O.J. Howard blocking again. He did a pretty good job acclimatising to the NFL as a blocker last week. I wouldn't be shocked to see... I mean, the Buccaneers use 2 tight end sets as much as anybody, so I expect to see them heavily featured, and I think you'll see a lot of 7-man blocking fronts to try and just stabilise and allow the two primary receivers to go out on routes on their own. Whilst that might make coverage pretty easy on the Vikings, the Buccaneers will have the ability. I mean, I don't know if this team will be able to hold up against both Evans and Jackson. Xavier Rhodes is a fantastic player. No doubt he'll draw the matchup with Mike Evans. I'm fascinated to see how they approach that and how that goes. Will they allow Rhodes to just defend one-on-one against Evans, or is he going to get some help over the top? This year, that's a question. Last year, absolutely that would have been the case. But we saw last week, the Bears, that every time they singled up Mike Evans, he was just too good for the guys covering him. Don't get me wrong, Xavier Rhodes is a significant step up from anyone that the Bears can offer at this point in time. You know, Marcus Cooper, not on that level. But one-on-one, it's just so difficult to stop Evans. He's just so big and powerful. It's hard to disrupt him early in routes because he just does tend to overpower guys. I think playing press on him is generally not a great idea unless it's a timing-based route. So that's going to be a huge matchup. I think if the safety helps there, that will cause problems in opening up to Sean Jackson. I don't know. They don't have anyone that can go with him. I think Harrison Smith has to shade over the top of Deshaun Jackson for a portion of this game, because he's a guy that is exceptionally good at not letting anything get behind him. And that's what Deshaun Jackson offers. We saw a few attempts at that last week, and the throws were just a little bit off. So the Buccaneers, I think that's what they're going to be gearing up to try and do in this game. Get the tight ends going over the middle, run the ball, try and hit a shot to Deshaun Jackson deep down the field. they're going to have to play a bit of a guessing game, because I don't think you can't afford to have a guy over the top of Deshaun Jackson all game long. But they're going to have to get it right in the spots that they do. And I can't see Deshaun having a lot of success over the top if Harrison Smith is sitting there. However, Deshaun Jackson is probably the X factor for this Buccaneers team. Beyond Xavier Rhodes, the other corners, I mean, I can't, as good as Terrence Newman's been, he can't keep up with this guy. And the other corners, I think Deshaun Jackson got a bit too much savvy and experience for them. And he's got the ability to take those short routes and take them, break them. And the Buccaneers haven't had that. I think it's a dynamic element of the offense that should really open things up this year. How well they can defend those tight ends is going to be essential. And this is where I think the problem with how to use Harrison Smith in this game comes in. There's a lot of threats here. I don't know if there's anyone that's got the coverage ability to deal with Cameron Brate in this linebacking core, but you don't really want to have to bring in a corner to try and deal with him, and I don't think you want to bring a safety down into the box too often against this Buccaneers team with those two wide receivers. So Smith is going to be the real chess piece. It will be a case of how well the Buccaneers can adapt to where he is on the field on any given play. Jameis, I think, has got a lot of leeway at the line of scrimmage to make adjustments, and whether he tries to attack Harrison Smith, which he absolutely shouldn't, will be an interesting part of this game. So for the Bucs, they've got to try and establish this run game, force the Vikings to have to bring that eighth man into the box. If they can do that, then I think they can hit some of those big plays over the top to Evans and Jackson, possibly even to the tight ends. If that happens, I think that's where the Vikings, once you're in, I think, kind of guessing game mode against this Buccaneers offense, that's when you're going to be in trouble. If they can shut that run down with just their front seven, I think they're good enough to sit in coverage, try and keep things in front of them, and just try and limit the big plays. I think that generally the defensive line is going to be more than good enough to get some pressure and possibly force Jameis into some mistakes. The big thing for them is making sure that happens and making the most of them when they do. The advantage in this game, I think, goes to the Buccaneers because I think their offense is just that bit more explosive, and I've got a bit more trust in them as an overall unit. But I think this is a really, really tight matchup. I could see this one going either way. Hoping Bradford plays from an evaluation perspective and also from an entertainment perspective. I think it's going to be a really interesting game if he does. If not, then it might get a little out of hand. This Case Keenum, I can't see him having success against this Bucs team. So there you have it. That's my assessment of the Buccaneers Vikings Week 3 matchup. Bucs looking to go 2-0. Obviously, I'm hoping they do. Let me know, what do you guys think of this matchup? Do you think if Case Keenum plays, they've got a shot? What did you think of these two teams in Week 2? Give us a shout. We've got the comment section below. We've got the Cover Zero Facebook page. You can follow me on Twitter at Simon Conboy. Always happy to talk football. And yeah, if you've enjoyed this, check out some of the other game previews. We've got game reviews. I've got the weekly live stream now. That's going to be a thing every Wednesday around 7:30, 8-ish Greenwich Mean Time. So that would be around 3 or 4 Eastern Time for you guys over there in the States. And then you can figure out Pacific Time from there. What's that? Another 3 hours, so about 2 in the afternoon, 1 in the afternoon kind of time. So check those out on the channel. They're a lot of fun. We're hoping to start getting some interaction involved if we can get enough viewers, start taking viewer questions, that kind of thing. I hope you enjoy those. I think they've been pretty entertaining thus far to do. Hope people are enjoying watching them, so check them out. And as always, if you can like, share, subscribe, check out the Patreon, that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure as always, guys. Have a great evening, and go Bucs.